automatically brought me into this other film, and this is a comedy, and a big one at that. In 1993, there was Mrs. Doubtfire with Robin Williams.
Oh, good. I'm glad you brought that one up.
Yeah.
We were talking about that, like, I think just out last week when we were out.
Yeah, and the thing with Robin Williams is it was one of those, or Mrs. Doubtfire, it was one of those movies where it was put on the screen for the first time. It kind of addressed the issue of divorce. And there are a lot of kids today who, have talked about Mrs. Doubtfire and how their parents went through a divorce, and that film actually helped them through that time. Understand what divorce was and all that stuff, because that was something that wasn't really talked about. It was something that I feel like was becoming common, unfortunately. And now it is, over 50% of people get divorced. So now it's just like, another thing, but it was great to actually have them, you could align with these very real characters. Even though it was funny, there were very serious tones to it.
Yeah. And I remember, watching that and seeing that scene between Robin Williams and Sally Field where the kids are in the room and they hear them fighting. And it's really loud. And some parts just feel vicious. And
yeah.
And you never hate Robin Williams, and you never hate Sally Field. I think the film does a nice job of not playing one side, because usually the mother is the one that ends up with the kids.
Right.
And he's not meant to be a jerk. He's not at all, because you see him with his kids, and he's just this loving father, and Sally Field is this loving mother as well. But it brought that, issue to the forefront, as you said. It brought homosexuality too, with his brother and his partner,
right?
Both uncles. Again, prior to where we are now, I think as a culture, and it was something else in that movie. Even just him like donning the dress,
yeah,
and being able to, I think, take that risk as an actor and just go for this. It wasn't just a silly movie. I think it was something that had major heart to it.
I think as far as movies in Robin Williams' career, that was one of the standout movies to me. I mean, a lot of people hate it, but I mean, there was Hook, which I thought was, Dustin Hoffman did a great job as Captain Hook, and I remember Robin Williams of that. There was
Good Will Hunting was 90s too.
Good Will Hunting was another excellent one where he won Best Supporting Actor, won the Academy Award. There were a lot of great movies, but when I think what movies has Robin Williams been in, that is the one that jumps out first for me. Just because it made me laugh, and my father's a big fan. Still is a big fan of his work, and and it was interesting too when I went to San Francisco 2 years ago for a couple of weeks. The one thing that I knew I had to do when I got there is like, I got to check out the Full House.
Yeah,
I just got to go by, and take a picture of it. And like 2 miles away was the Mrs. Doubtfire house, and I to stand there and be in front of that house was just like a cool experience to me. And oddly enough, reality, I think it was like a month and a half later, he passes away. And I was like, I was just at that damn house.
And I know we've talked about Robin Williams passing away, and I'm being just in all seriousness. Every time we talk about him, I start to think like, wow, he's not going to be giving us any more of these characters. And I know there were some things that he did that were like, maybe he just did for the paycheck, but he did so many iconic roles and so many memorable ones, from drama to just comedy to even some very serious ones. I still have just very, very vivid memories of a guest appearance that he did on Law & Order SVU. It was so chilling. And they left it with him going into this place, and it blows up, but they leave it with the sense that they didn't find the body. And I'm like, oh, they're going to have to bring back his character. And they never did.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously it's not going to happen now, but it was one of those episodes where I was like, wow, he really scared me. And it was just some of his subtleties of, of like kind of what he did in like 1 Hour Photo and Insomnia.
1 Hour Photo was so excellent.
And just his darker stuff. And I love when comedians can go to those places, because you're used to seeing them in some, certain light. And I feel that they want to stretch themselves. And that's so cool to me. I don't feel like, all right, they're just doing it for, not all the time, they're just doing it for the paycheck, or they're just doing it to say, I want to try to win an Academy Award. I think when he did those, he was cast against type and made me think like this guy's just not typecast.
Well,
he's done so many diverse pieces of work here. So
one other thing that I really like about him as an actor, you talk about somebody who can kind of jump into character and switch on a dime. There's, a scene in 1 Hour Photo that I watched on like the making of the movie, and it was him in this really twisted scene. I forget exactly what it was, but where he's having a very hard time dealing with something, and they come to drop off photos, and he's a little distant, and all of a sudden they're like, cut, and then he jumps out, and he's literally making everyone laugh in hysterics in between takes.
Yeah.
And then 2 seconds later, it's action, and he steps right back in, and he's dark as shit. And that's as a comedian, I mean, something was as fast as him and as quick as him, he was an extremely talented actor, as we see. So it's just interesting to see those two sides of him, but then there's the side of him that nobody really knew about, which led to his, death. I mean, it's hard, man. Like, dude, there are times still when I hear about him that he passed away, I still like can't believe that he died. Like, I just can't. It's ridiculous. So, but it's one of those things. We have to accept it and, just look back at the work he has done, coming back to the earlier part of the podcast where his work will constantly live on just because of film today. It can be accessed anywhere. Yeah.
So, we'll be having this conversation maybe like, let's talk about the 2010.
Yeah.
But I feel like we won't be able to have that because the 2000s, I feel all just blend together anyway.
They really do, but it's a lot of reboots and remakes.
Yeah. But if I can come back quickly, when you were talking about the field trip and I said, I think I know what you're going to say.
Yeah.
It's another one of the 90s that I would not have seen.
Mm-hmm.
Had it not been assigned as an extra credit assignment, and I needed the extra credit, I felt I needed to.
I'm really interested.
Bring my grade up, and if we went to see it and wrote some type of a report or review or analysis or something to that degree, was Schindler's List.
Oh God, such a damn good movie.
And
I was actually thinking about that in another point a couple.
And a friend of mine and I were the only two. It was a good buddy of mine from high school, and we were in the same English class. And he and I were talking. We're like, "Do you want to go see it?" And we went and saw it on a night, like on a Tuesday night or something like that, because I think the next day might have been like Veterans Day. I remember this, and I was sick as a dog. But we went, sat there, and we had our notepads because this was before the phones and all of this, where you could just take those notes. And I remember just watching this, and I'm taking my notes because I want to write something comprehensive because I wanted to put good work into this. And I was like, wow, it's so powerful. And I felt really good about it afterwards, that it was not just it didn't become just about the extra credit for me. It ended up becoming like an experience I was so glad that I did. I didn't even give a shit if I didn't write this thing. And I did end up writing the paper. But a few, I think, weeks or maybe like a month later, our history classes set up a field trip to go see Schindler's List. So I got to see it a second time without having to take notes and watch at the same time. And seeing it for a second time and trying to pick up
new things,
what I missed, and just feeling very, I guess, humbled that what I had in life and what I never had to go through. Spielberg created just a very realistic story there, and I was glad I got to see that on the big screen because I appreciated film, but not to the way I do now. And it was just so powerful, and it's not one you can just watch all the time. It's sad, but
I mean, it's also a very true story of what went down in Nazi Germany and all that stuff, and I think and this was meant to be something that you don't forget, and I didn't forget it when I saw Schindler's List for the first time. And I'll never forget it, is the girl in the red dress.
Yep.
They show you that for a reason. She hides under a bed, and then like an hour later, you see like her body in like this, thing. A wheelbarrow come by, and that red dress is highlighted, and it was like so chilling when I saw that. It was probably one of the most disturbing things.
Well, it was all the bodies, and
and
when I watched several years later, when I watched the Band of Brothers miniseries, they had an episode where the soldiers stumble upon a concentration / death camp, and they don't know what it is. Like this, they knew what Hitler was trying to do, but they stumble upon this, and it was one of the most powerful episodes of television I had ever seen. I remember actually getting choked up at some parts of this because it was so sad to watch, and these, prisoners who were still alive were so grateful to the American soldiers. But there was one part of that where they open up this big truck, and all the bodies are just there piled up. And it was exactly what Spielberg, I think, tried to show at the end, that whole dehumanization of, we're just going to take these bodies into like a wheelbarrow, some kind of cart or whatever. And that little red dress was there. So Spielberg knew, I think, to tug on the heartstrings for that film. But then with Oscar Schindler at the end and trying to, he's upset about, he wished he could have saved more. And you're just watching this whole story unfold, and very realistic depiction. I love the fact that it was shot in black and white. It worked for me. Yeah. It wouldn't have worked if the whole film was in color, not just because the little girl's dress, but to set it in that time period was, I think, a groundbreaking film, and a tough film, I think, to tackle as a director, especially a director who's Jewish, too. I think he felt that was part of, who he is in some ways, and wanted to, tell this accurate story as best as he could.
Well, I think a movie like that is kind of like, when I think about Schindler's List, I also think about another Spielberg film, which was Saving Private Ryan. And that was also 98. So you look at, you kind of look at that, and that was also groundbreaking as far as like that time period and the war, and it got a little bit more personal, trying to search for this specific, like all these soldiers, risking their lives to save this one soldier.
Yeah, it was a different type of storytelling, because who knows if this type of stuff went on, and we're just focused on these, 8 or 9 guys.
Mm-hmm. And hey, Tom Hanks, another movie for Tom Hanks.
Yep, against the background of World War II.
And one of Matt Damon's big films that put him on the map, too.
Yeah. And that one he did some really good, techniques in that, too. I remember the opening scene where the bullets are flying, and then there's just dead silence. And I remember thinking, did the sound go out in this movie? What's going on here? Yeah. And it was trying to almost, I think, suggest to the audience, did these soldiers try to tune some of this out and really try to focus on what they need to do, so they're not even hearing the sound? It's almost becoming, they're so desensitized to it. It was also scary at the same time, because they're constantly around this gunfire, and then it resumes again.
But I think that was a brilliant choice, because you're watching this movie and you're really just thinking about, if you're in that situation, which I've never been, but I feel like if I was ever in that situation, you would tune out almost everything around you and be in your own thoughts.
Yeah.
And trying to get yourself in the mindset. I mean, I don't know how the hell you wrap your mind around something like that. And the other thing that was very disturbing, it was one of the first, that was one of those movies where they said the opening scene was one of the most violent things that had been done in a while. I mean, like, there's a guy that gets his arm ripped off, and you see him looking around, and he picks up his own arm.
Yes.
There's a guy who a bullet ricochets off his helmet, and then he takes it off to check his head, and his head gets blown off.
Yep.
I mean, it really was nuts. And then you got these boatloads of guys, which to me didn't make sense, pulling up to a beach where there's ongoing fire, and they drop the front of the steel door and just get leveled.
Yeah.
And like something like that, when I saw that for the first time, I think I went with my dad, we just kind of looked at each other, and I was like, holy shit. Like, this is D-Day. You know what I mean? Like, this happened.
Well, he didn't try to shy away from what war can be, and I think that from the outside looking in, we're like, okay, why do they even drop that? But as soldiers, they're trained to fight. They see an objective, and I think they understand that they could possibly die. So that's what made that opening very powerful, which led to the ending to make that more powerful, too, that it's war. They're going to be casualties of a war. We know war is never positive. And it was very bleak, with moments of that humanity and some humor and kindness, but it quickly comes back to just the bloodshed.
Mm-hmm. And I think there's one scene in Saving Private Ryan that you talk about things that are hard to watch. There's one scene that every time I see it, I have a problem watching it. It's almost like I don't want to watch it, but I end up making myself watch it in a sense.
Yep.
It's the scene where